So, this is Hansel and Gretel, but my retelling. So, nestle into bed or whatever, tuck your kids in, and put this on and just leave them to be thoroughly edified by what I've written down here. So, this is not Hansel and Gretel. This is Hamslice and Pretzel. They're still German kids. They've just got dumber names in my version. So, Hamslice and Pretzel. Fairytale Revisionism. Once upon a time, there was a family that lived on the edge of the woods. The mother of the two kids, whose names were Hamslice and Pretzel, had departed a year prior, leaving behind her husband and children. The kids' father had remarried 364 days ago to their stepmother. This was not an act of deep spite, because Hamslice and Pretzel's mother wasn't dead. She had left their family when a frog at the family's pond had turned into a prince from her kiss. She left them. Poor kids, man. Poor kids. Hamslice and Pretzel loved their father dearly. Every morning he would leave to cut the wood that was the sole living of their family. Their stepmother, however, had a different daily routine. For the last 364 days, Hamslice and Pretzel's stepmother would leap out of bed first thing in the morning and charge down to the pond to wade in with a net and dutifully kiss anything that came up in it. Pretzel speculated that, had another frog turned into a prince from her stepmother's kisses, he would have died from the wretchedness of her stepmother's bad morning breath. That is why Pretzel always brushed her teeth and tongue before going down to put in a shift at the pond herself. This was in clear competition with her stepmother, and their interpersonal friction is what prodded our story in the seat of the pants. Let me muster up a German accent here. Hamslice, Pretzel said one day. Hamslice, I do not like a mother. A stepmother, I should say. Hamslice, I do not like a stepmother. Ah, Hamslice replied. This is a thing I do not know how to do. Zing. I don't know if he's Russian or whatever. Bear with me. Zing. The foremost reason he said this is because this is the only thing he ever said to anything. So the best conversations that Pretzel had enjoyed with him had typically been the ones while he was sleeping. Hamslice, shut your stupid fat face, she cooed lovingly. Hamslice was fat. Hamslice had a face. As for the other adjective, well, figure it out yourself. Hamslice, we must get out of here before she does something dreadful to us. She loved it when Hamslice nodded. The stack of chins that sagged on his chest would jiggle like ripples in a pond after she had just thrown a thoroughly traumatized frog back in. Hamslice, we are going to explore the woods until we find a new nest of until we find something else. If Hamslice's brain wasn't even smaller than his life expectancy, he might have seen through the lie. Well, if Hamslice's brain was as large as his appetite, he could have cured cancer. As it was, Hamslice said, this is a thing I do not know how to do. Zing. Hamslice, I have some pieces of bread. We must go into the woods and leave a trail of crumbs to get out again if we need to, Pretzel said. Follow me. Pretzel shuffled and Hamslice waddled into the shades of the woods. Down went the first crumb, down went their spirits. Only Pretzel's lust for frogs held them to their purpose. They began to move forward. Hours later, Pretzel realized she had finally crumbled her last crumb. Not a single amphibian yet had their eyes seen. So wearily, she turned to start the long trek home. In a horrifying quick scan of the woodsy carpet, she realized that even the crumb she had just dropped had vanished. Hamslice and Pretzel were stranded. Hamslice! Hamslice! What do we do? Pretzel shrieked bansheeily. Ah, this is a thing I do not know how to do. Zink, Hamslice said, around a fat mouthful of breadcrumbs. The curtain of discretion will shield the next few minutes of Pretzel's behavior from the public eye. Oh, whoops, my bad. I think I accidentally discreted too long. That's what this says. The next sentence is just, Hamslice and Pretzel's salivary glands had sprung a leak. The house was made out of gingerbread. I guess that is the next plot point, though, so we're gonna roll with it. Hamslice and Pretzel's salivary glands had sprung a leak. Or, no, just sprung a leak. The house was made out of gingerbread. Frosted gingerbread. Dimly, Pretzel was aware that her brother seemed to have sprung a leak as well. The haze of forest sounds. That's rather nice. The haze of forest sounds were being undergirded by a drone of Hamslice's favorite sentence. Take a guess what that is. Around the 50th repetition, she slapped him, and the mindless admirer was replaced by a mindless beast. Hamslice went berserk. Jaw buzzing, he drilled into the nearest section of gingerbread siding. He slowed for a moment at a section of candy cane plumbing, which should have been warning enough. But the beast would not be stopped. He reached drywall, and then his head was in empty space. Well, not exactly empty space. Screams filled it to the brim. What are you doing in my bathroom, fatty? The screams had a sculptor. Now they were words. The sculptor was at the far end of the bathroom in front of a glazed mirror, swaddled in a lavender bathrobe with a towel turban. It was a witch. A witch in the middle of applying her make-down. Various products advertised as having hideousness-enhancing properties. The witch put down the can of Rumpelstiltskin's Miracle Nose Hooking Cream. One of her biggest insecurities had always been the rectitude of her nose. She had just been dutifully applying the cream. Stomped over and uncorked Hamslice from the wall, wrenching him into the room by his sandy German hair. Idiot boy, do you know, idiot boy, do you have any idea how few plumbers know how to repair candy cane? To the dungeon with you. I guess she's from the south of Germany. Pretzel listened in horror as Hamslice broke every possible piece of furniture with a typhoon of thrashings as the witch dragged him and cast him into her basement dungeon. Pretzel that is, ran to the slit in the rock candy foundation of the gingerbread house and squinted through the licorice bars. Hamslice wept. Over the next week, Pretzel racked her brain, running all around the forest on a permanent sugar high. Calories. But no opportunity for Hamslice's rescue appeared. It had taken her till Tuesday to realize that you can eat licorice bars, but by then Hamslice could not fit through the slit in the wall, the window slit. If she tried to eat the slit wider, she knew that the time that would take would see Hamslice unable to stand, because he's getting fatter, Also, Hamslice did not ever help her with her plans to escape. He was content. At the end of the first week, Pretzel overheard one of the witch's visits to Hamslice. They had been getting more and more frequent, and she heard exactly what she had been dreading. The witch told Hamslice that she was going to have him for dinner that very night. The next few hours were horrifying and surreal for Pretzel, but they passed all the same. She found herself at a sugar-paned window watching as the witch helped Hamslice trundle up the stairs from the basement, listening as the witch apologized to Hamslice for imprisoning him and explained that she very much appreciated his listening ear for all the time she had come down to talk to him, watching as the witch sat him gently on a stool and set the table for two. listening as the witch explained the diet plan she was going to put him on and how access to sweets was ruining him, and how that was her fault for keeping him locked away where that was his only sustenance. Watching as the witch stirred her boiling pot, listening as the witch explained how happy they would both be in each other's company forevermore. Pretzel's stomach churned, realizing this was a clear innuendo. Hamslice would be in her company forever because the witch would eat him. Pretzel was a lass of action. Sugar glass splintered around her as she erupted into the room.
"Oh, is that your sister? How lovely. I'll set the table for one more. If she's anything like yourself, I would only be too happy to have her help in alleviating the lonely funk the woods have had me in. Ugh."
As the witch finished delightedly, Pretzel's shoulder cratered her stomach in and flipped her over the rim of the pot of vegetable stew. I could say the witch was dead. But remember how the curtain of discretion messed us up before? Yeah, that shan't happen again. Time for some detail. Over the next quarter of an hour, Pretzel took up the ladle and beat the old woman down every time she would come up, screaming and scalding. At last, the witch's flesh was so tender that it began to peel away from the bone. And still Pretzel did not heed the witch's deceitful disclaimers of intention or agonized cries of loneliness and pain. She only stopped when, stirring the pot, she could feel the witch's separate bones clacking together at the bottom. "Hamslice," she panted, "we must get out of here." She went to the door and tried to decide what direction of the woody night they were going to charge off into. She turned back to fetch Hamslice. Hamslice put down the empty pot of stew and wiped his mouth greedily. They left the gingerbread cabin, ledgers dripping red with sin. Dawn began bleeding down by drops into the forest undergrowth by the time that they reached their first obstacle. A slow but wide river blocked their further progress. Pretzel, as we've noted, was a lass of action, and lassies of action stick their tongues out at rivers. So and lassies of action stick their tongues out at rivers. After pulling her tongue back in her mouth, Pretzel went to work, selecting a barge pole. She knocked Hamslice onto his back in the shallows, stepped up on his stomach, and pushed off from the bank. About halfway, and about 2 of Hamslice's broken ribs into the crossing, disaster struck. That most fateful of sounds rent the air. A croak. The croak of a frog. Before the last T of the ribbit exited the frog's lips, they came into contact with Pretzel's. The transformed prince swam to the bank with Pretzel in tow, and they rode on his white horse into the sunrise. Hamslice, stranded in the river after Pretzel had left off him in the direction of the croak, floated there. And then the current took him, and some of them lived happily ever after. The end. There are a bunch of quail over there. Chirping. Well, that was pretty dumb. I'm pretty sure the way I read it was even dumber. I wish I could sustain more eye contact throughout these things, but you guys, you're just too intimidating. Yeah. No, it's... I've been doing a lot of things that have been written down, reading from scripts recently. So, just been, reading them from scripts. Exactly what I just said half a second ago. Hopefully, in the near future, maybe putting out some more just like ponderous little things of me sitting down, like Dry Creek Wrangler style, and just talking about something. But maybe not. I don't have an entertaining brain when it comes to improv. I'm a little funnier written down. But even that, I mean, you'd agree that was pretty stupid, huh? Pretty dumb. I should probably stop. I should probably just kill myself. Because nobody ever watches these things.